Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator Avella, and thanks to the Democratic Conference for having today's forum, for your environmental leadership, and for your sponsorship of critically important legislation regarding the risks of hydraulic fracturing. My name is Kate Sinding. I'm a senior attorney with the Natural Resources Defense Council. We thank and commend you for taking the risks of fracking head-on and introducing a significant number of pieces of important legislation directed at those risks. While the DEC is still engaged in its ongoing review under SECRA, pursuant to which a de facto moratorium continues to be in effect on high-volume hydraulic fracturing, there are a number of important actions that the legislature can take now to address threats presented not just by proposed new fracking, but by so-called low-volume fracking that is already occurring in New York today. In my 3 minutes, I'm going to just focus on one of those threats, one that we believe to be among the most vexing and inadequately considered by DEC to date, and one that we believe renders it impossible for New York State to responsibly move forward with proposed new fracking. And that's the problem of wastewater generation and management. DEC, through the revised draft SGICE, estimates that proposed high-volume fracking in the Marcellus Shale Formation would generate enormous quantities of wastewater on the order of tens or even hundreds of billions of gallons over the next few decades. Moreover, as you undoubtedly know, that wastewater will be contaminated with a slew of contaminants, ranging from the chemicals used in frac fluid, many of them toxic, which return to the surface as flowback, to naturally occurring heavy metals, volatile organic compounds, total dissolved solids or salts, and radioactive materials in produced water. To compound matters, as NRDC will be highlighting in a forthcoming report on wastewater issues in the Marcellus region, the limited options for how to manage this toxic wastewater represent a menu of unappetizing, if not wholly unacceptable options. There are essentially four available management approaches. First, wastewater can be shipped out of state for deep well injection. This necessitates huge amounts of truck traffic on what would already be severely overburdened local roads and presents the risk of earthquakes in the receiving state, likely Ohio. Second, it can be sent to publicly or privately owned treatment facilities and discharged into the state's waterways. In no instance should publicly owned treatment works be allowed to accept the waste. If for no other reason, and there are other reasons, then that many of them are already near, at, or over capacity, and so accepting fracking wastewaters would render them unable to deal with municipal sewage properly. Technologies associated with removing the contaminants at privately owned facilities, including the extraordinarily high levels of salts, are energy intensive in their own right, implicating impacts that must be further evaluated. Third, it can be spread on roads for dust or ice suppression. In no case should this be permitted in New York. It makes no sense at all. The groundwater contamination risks from the high levels of salt alone are simply too great for this to be a reasonable approach. Lastly, it can be recycled or reused. While this option has some appeal on its face, the fact is that the technology does not yet exist to meaningfully recycle the highly salty produced water that constitutes a significant portion of the overall waste stream. And again, the energy intensity associated with technologies to remove the high levels of salt so that it could be reused are inadequately understood and have not been evaluated. Yet DEC has no plan as to how to address these projected huge volumes of toxic wastewater. None. Rather, DEC has taken the position that it's not necessary to evaluate how wastewater will be managed or the inevitable impacts associated with any of the presently dissatisfactory management options in the context of a generic environmental impact statement. They will wait and see, they say, what the companies propose to do with the wastewater in their applications and then figure it out. Even assuming, for the sake of argument only, that that was legally appropriate, it's terrible policy. Simply put, in the absence of any viable plan for addressing the huge projected quantities of toxic fracking waste, New York State is not prepared to move forward with any proposed new fracking. Fortunately, there is action that the legislature can take now that would not only begin to put some protections in place, but would also address the liquid and solid waste already being generated through ongoing fracking in New York. Senator Avella, your bill, 4616, would remove the existing regulatory loophole that exempts gas development wastes from the legal definition of hazardous waste, making what are, in fact, hazardous wastes subject to the state's cradle-to-grave regulatory program. We urge the Senate to quickly take up and pass SB 4616, which is already passed in the Assembly. The legislature also can and should enact a formal moratorium on any new fracking, which would give DEC the opportunity to fully and properly consider not only the risks presented by toxic wastewater generation and management, but the full suite of threats attendant to fracking, something that they have not yet done. Senate Bill 6261 would do just that, and again, we urge its swift passage. Thank you again, Senator Avella and Senator Krueger, for your leadership on these issues. Thank you to the Democratic Conference and for the opportunity to testify today.